Close your eyes and imagine a world where gold represents not wealth, but imprisonment. Where every throne is built on the corpses of gods. Where the stars themselves have been held hostage for centuries, frozen in their courses by a demigod's will. Where death itself was once stolen, and its return brought only madness and decay. This is the lands between. A realm caught in the grip of gods who demand worship but offer no salvation. A place where champions rise only to fall into ruin, where love curdles into obsession, where loyalty becomes chains, and where every attempt to fix what's broken only shatters it further. Tonight, we journey through the complete history of Elden Ring. From the age when the Greater Will first descended from the cosmos, through the golden reign that was never as golden as it seemed, to the moment the Elden Ring shattered and plunged the world into endless war. This is not a story of heroes triumphing over evil. This is a story of gods who failed, champions who fell, curses that cannot be lifted, and a world that learned too late that some things, once broken, can never truly be repaired. So get comfortable, let the rain wash over you, and let's explore the grimdark beauty of the lands between. Let's discover why every crown weighs like a noose, why every victory tastes like ash, and why the lands between remain trapped in a cycle of suffering that may never end. This video contains complete spoilers for Elden Ring, including all major story revelations, character fates, and ending variations. If the lands between still hold mysteries for those listening, consider returning to this journey after exploring them firsthand. For everyone else, let the story unfold. Long before the Erdtree grew, long before Marika became a goddess, long before the lands between even had that name, there was only the primordial crucible of life. A chaotic, churning mass where all living things were blended together, where forms shifted and merged, where there was no order, no hierarchy, no separation between species. This was not evil. It was not good. It simply was. Life in its rawest, most unrefined state. Horns grew from unexpected places. Tails sprouted. Wings emerged. Everything was everything, and nothing was fixed. The crucible did not judge. It did not demand. It simply created endlessly, without purpose or plan. But in the cosmos beyond, entities existed that did have purpose. The outer gods, as they would come to be known, though that name grants them more divinity than they deserve. They were not gods in any benevolent sense. They were forces. Hungers. Desires given cosmic scale. And one of these forces looked down at the lands between and saw potential. The Greater Will. It's unclear what the Greater Will truly is. Some say it's the source of all order in the universe. Others claim it's merely the most successful of the outer gods, the one that best learned how to disguise its tyranny as natural law. What is certain is that the Greater Will sent something down to the lands between. A golden star. The Elden Beast, a living embodiment of its power, fell from the heavens and burrowed into the fabric of the world itself. With the Elden Beast came the Elden Ring, though it would take a different form in those early days. The ring was not a physical object, not yet. It was a set of laws, a cosmic programming language that could rewrite the rules of existence itself. With the Elden Ring, the Greater Will could impose order on the chaos of the crucible. Death could be controlled. Life could be regulated. The wild, beautiful mess of existence could be tamed. But order requires enforcers. The Greater Will needed agents in the physical world, beings who could channel its power and impose its laws. This is where the Age of Dragons began, though perhaps began is the wrong word. The dragons were already ancient when the Greater Will arrived. They existed outside time in a strange sense, their stone scales marking them as something beyond the normal flow of mortality. Placidosax was the Elden Lord of this age, a great dragon with multiple heads, each one speaking with the authority of the divine. The Elden Ring existed in a different configuration then, perhaps more primal, less refined. Placidosax served an outer god, though whether this was the Greater Will or some predecessor is lost to time. What is known is that Placidosax's god fled. Simply, left. Abandoned the lands between and its Elden Lord. Placidosax waited for eons, sleeping outside time itself in a crumbling temple, waiting for a god that would never return. This would become a pattern in the lands between. Gods demanding absolute loyalty, then abandoning those who gave it. While dragons ruled the skies, another civilization thrived in the frozen peaks of the mountain tops. The giants, beings of incredible strength and strange magic, tended an enormous flame. The Flame of Ruin, they called it, though that name came later, given by those who feared it. The giant's flame was not evil. It was simply fire, ancient and powerful, connected to something beyond the greater will's influence. This made it dangerous to the emerging Golden Order. As long as the giant's flame burned, there existed power in the lands between that the greater will could not fully control. The giants lived in relative isolation, their civilization mysterious and separate from the developments below. They had their own god, a fell god dwelling within the flame, one-eyed and burning. They carved their history in stone and fire, and for an age, they were left alone. But that age would not last. From somewhere in the lands between, a people called the Numen emerged. They were long-lived, with otherworldly features said to have come from outside the lands between entirely. Among the Numen was a woman who would reshape reality itself. Her name was Marika. The details of Marika's early life are shrouded in mystery, deliberately obscured by her own design. What is known suggests a past filled with suffering. There are whispers of a village, of a grandmother, of a jar. The shamans of Marika's village were targeted for a horrific practice. Their bodies, their very flesh, could be blended together in pots to create something new. The jar saints, they were called later, in a grotesque euphemism that transformed horror into holiness. Whether Marika survived such treatment, or merely witnessed it, the trauma shaped her utterly. She learned early that the world was cruel, that the powerful would use the weak however they wished, that flesh itself was not sacred but merely material to be exploited. Then came Mater, the mother of fingers. A cosmic being, a daughter of the greater will, who dwelt in the depths and served as a conduit for the greater will's communications. Through the two fingers that spawned from Mater, the greater will made its desires known. And somehow, Marika came to the attention of these forces. The greater will chose her. Or perhaps she chose it. The distinction may not matter. What matters is that Marika was selected to become a vessel for the Elden Ring, to embody the greater will's order in physical form, to become a god. But there was a price. There is always a price. To become a goddess requires shedding one's mortality, one's freedom, one's very self. The Elden Ring would be housed within Marika's body, making her a living prison for the very laws of reality. She would be worshipped, yes, but she would also be a slave to forces beyond her control, a puppet dancing on golden strings. Did she know this when she accepted? Did she understand what she was giving up? Or did she, traumatized and desperate for power in a world that had shown her only suffering, grasp at divinity without understanding its cost? We will never know. But Marika took the Elden Ring into herself, and in that moment, she became Queen Marika the Eternal. God. Ruler. Prisoner. With Marika as its vessel, the Golden Order began to truly take shape. The Erdtree sprouted, growing massive and golden, visible from every corner of the lands between. It was beautiful. It was majestic. And it was a monument to control. The Erdtree's roots spread deep, drawing upon the power of the great tree that had existed before, absorbing it, replacing it. The Erdtree did not grow from nature. It grew from divine mandate, and it served a specific purpose. When beings died in the lands between, their souls would return to the Erdtree, absorbed into its golden light, recycled and reborn. Death became a part of the order, regulated and controlled. Except the Erdtree was selective. Not all souls were welcomed. Those deemed unworthy, those who died outside grace, found their souls unable to return to the Erdtree. This would have consequences that echoed through ages. Marika needed a consort, an Elden Lord to rule beside her. The Greater Will provided one. Godfrey, a warrior of incredible strength and savagery, was chosen. He was also called Hoaralu, his true name, a name that spoke of wildness barely contained. Godfrey was fierce, perhaps too fierce. His bloodlust in battle was so overwhelming that it threatened to consume him entirely. To temper this, a counselor was provided. Sirash, a great beast, a lion of terrible power, would cling to Godfrey's back. Sirash's presence would restrain Godfrey's most violent impulses, allowing him to function as a lord rather than merely a force of destruction. It was a gilded leash. Godfrey was powerful, yes, but he was also controlled, his very nature suppressed by the beast on his back. Together, Marika and Godfrey would have children. Godwyn the Golden, their firstborn, would become the embodiment of everything the Golden Order claimed to represent. Noble, brave, kind. He befriended dragons, ending the ancient war between dragon and man not through conquest but through honor. Godwyn was perhaps the only purely good thing the Golden Order ever produced. They had other children too. Morgoth and Mog, twin sons born with a curse. They were omens, beings born with horns and strange powers, considered foul and evil by the very order their mother embodied. In any other family, twins might be celebrated. In Marika's family, these children were hidden away in the depths beneath the capital, imprisoned in darkness for the crime of being born wrong. Marika, who had perhaps suffered herself, chose to imprison her own children rather than challenge the order she embodied. The goddess could not show mercy to omens, even when those omens were her own flesh and blood. The Golden Order demanded it. And Marika, for all her power, was still a slave to that order. The giants and their flame could not be tolerated. As long as the flame of ruin burned, it represented power outside the greater will's control. The flame could burn the Erdtree itself, burn away the Golden Order, return the world to something wilder and less controlled. Marika commanded Godfrey to wage war against the giants. And Godfrey obeyed. The war was brutal. Giants were powerful, their bodies massive, their magic strange and ancient. But Godfrey was relentless. The troll armies fought alongside the giants, creatures of stone and strength, but even they fell before Godfrey's might. The mountaintops ran red with giant blood. Entire generations were slaughtered. The flame was suppressed, contained, reduced to embers. But one giant remained, the last of his kind, cursed to tend the flame forever. The fire giant, chained to his duty, forced to guard the very flame that represented his people's destruction. And to ensure the flame could never threaten the Erdtree again, Marika placed a curse upon the mountaintops themselves. Eternal winter descended, freezing the peaks, burying the giants' civilization under snow and ice. The war was won, but the cost was genocide. An entire people erased from the world to secure the Golden Order's dominance. Godfrey had served his purpose. He had conquered the giants, the dragons, the Storm Lord. He had secured Marika's rule through violence and bloodshed. But now, there were no more enemies to fight. The lands between were at peace, and peace had no use for a warrior like Godfrey. Marika stripped Godfrey of his grace, the golden light that marked one as blessed by the Erdtree. Without grace, he was no longer Elden Lord. He was simply a warrior, powerful but purposeless. Sirash still clung to his back, but now the beast felt less like protection and more like a reminder of restraint without purpose. Godfrey was exiled, sent beyond the lands between, cast out with his warriors who had also lost their grace. They became the Tarnished, a name of shame. They wandered the Badlands beyond the fog, fighting and dying in foreign lands, stripped of their divinity but still clinging to the warrior's code that had defined them. Why did Marika do this? The answer would only become clear much later. Marika was planning something. Even then, even at the height of her power, the goddess was planting seeds of rebellion against the very order she embodied. But that rebellion would require pieces on the board. And the Tarnished, exiled but not destroyed, would serve that purpose when the time came. With Godfrey gone, Marika needed a new consort. But this time, she did not choose a warrior. She chose something stranger. Something that, perhaps, she did not choose at all. Radagon of the Golden Order appeared, a champion with red hair and golden ambition. He was a warrior of considerable skill, a scholar of magic, and utterly devoted to the Golden Order. He married Renala, the queen of the Carian royal family, a powerful sorceress who ruled the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Radagon and Renala's marriage was, by all accounts, genuine. He loved her. They had children together. Runni, Radon, and Rykard, each inheriting aspects of their parents' power. Radagon seemed content in his role as Renala's consort, helping to forge an alliance between the Golden Order and the Academy of Sorcery. But then Marika called him back. The truth was revealed, and it was stranger than anyone could have imagined. Radagon was not simply Marika's consort. He was Marika. Not in the sense of being her husband or her partner, but in the literal sense. They were the same being, split into two bodies, two minds, two aspects of the same existence. How this came to be is unclear. Was Radagon created by Marika? Was he split from her? Were they always two parts of one whole? The answer is lost in the same mysteries that shroud Marika's ascension to godhood. What is clear is that Radagon, upon learning of his true nature or perhaps upon receiving Marika's command, abandoned Renala and returned to Lendl. He became Marika's consort, which meant he was essentially marrying himself, an act of theological and metaphysical complexity that the Golden Order simply accepted because what else could it do? Renala was devastated. The love of her life had left her, and worse, had left her for a being that was somehow both other and self. She retreated into the academy, cradling the amber egg that Radagon had given her as a parting gift. Inside that egg was a fragment of something, a promise or perhaps just a memory. Renala's mind began to slip, her grief consuming her, her magic turning inward and strange. From Marika and Radagon's union came more children, because apparently the theological implications of one being reproducing with itself were less important than maintaining the royal line. Maelnia and Niquella were born, twins, and both were cursed from birth. Maelnia was afflicted with scarlet rot, a horrific decay that ate at her body from the inside, requiring her to constantly fight against her own flesh just to survive. Niquella was cursed with eternal childhood, his body forever young, unable to grow or age despite his mind maturing. He would remain a child in form no matter how ancient his soul became. These were Marika's children with Radagon, who was also Marika, which made them products of divine self-reproduction, and perhaps that was the problem. When a god reproduces with itself, when the same essence is recombined rather than mixed with something new, curses emerge. Maelnia and Niquella were brilliant, powerful, and doomed from the moment they drew breath. The Golden Order proclaimed them Embrians, beings with the potential to become gods themselves. This was supposed to be an honor. In truth, it was a sentence. To be chosen by the outer gods is not a gift. It is a marking, a claim, a chain waiting to be fastened. Throughout all of this, one crucial element of the Elden Ring had been removed and hidden away. The rune of death, the very concept of mortality, had been plucked from the ring by Marika herself. She entrusted it to her shadow, a beast named Malekith. Without the rune of death in the Elden Ring, true death became impossible in the lands between. Those who fell would return to the Erdtree, their souls recycled, reborn. It seemed like a gift. Immortality for all who served the Golden Order. No more fear of death. No more permanent loss. But it was a curse disguised as a blessing. Without death, nothing could truly end. Suffering could not be escaped. The sick could not find peace. The mad could not be released. Grudges would last forever. Wounds would never truly heal because the wounded would never truly die. And for Marika, this created something else. A population that could never be free of her rule. Subjects who could not escape through death. An eternal kingdom for an eternal queen, both trapped in their immortality together. Malekith, the beast clergyman, bore the rune of death as his burden. Half-brother to Marika, loyal beyond measure, he guarded destined death with absolute devotion. The rune was sealed away in his blade, and he was hidden in a place few would ever reach. As long as Malekith lived, death itself was imprisoned. The Golden Order was complete. Marika ruled as God. The Erdtree stood golden and eternal. Death was controlled. The giants were destroyed. The dragons were subdued. The lands between were united under one law, one order, one truth. It was perfect. It was terrible. And it could not last. The Golden Order was not simply a government or a religion. It was a fundamental rewriting of reality's rules, enforced through the Elden Ring housed within Marika's body. Every law, every truth, every assumption about how the world worked flowed from the ring's configuration. Fundamentalists studied the Golden Order like a science, because in many ways it was one. They learned to manipulate the laws of reality through incantations, bending causality itself to their will. But this study revealed something troubling. The more closely the fundamentalists examined the Golden Order, the more they found flaws. Small inconsistencies at first. Contradictions in the ring's logic. Places where the divine law did not quite align with itself. These should not exist. Divine perfection should be perfect, after all. But the cracks were there, and they were growing. Brother Corrin, a devout teacher of the Golden Order, dedicated his life to understanding these fundamentals. Alongside him worked Gold Mask, a brilliant scholar who had taken a vow of silence and covered himself in golden wrappings. Gold Mask saw what others missed. He perceived the flaw at the very heart of the Golden Order. The problem was the gods themselves. The Elden Ring was meant to be perfect, eternal, unchanging law. But it was housed in Marika, who was a being, a person with desires and will and the capacity for doubt. And she shared her being with Radagon, who had his own nature, his own desires. The gods were supposed to enforce the order, but they were also variables within it. Their whims, their choices, their very existence introduced chaos into what was meant to be perfect structure. This was the Golden Order's fundamental flaw. You cannot have perfect order enforced by imperfect beings. You cannot have eternal law dependent on the mood of gods. The system was broken from its inception, and no amount of faith or study could fix it. Gold Mask developed what he called the Golden Order Perfected, a theoretical restructuring that would remove the gods' ability to interfere with the order. Make the law truly eternal by removing the lawmaker's power to change it. It was brilliant. It was logical. It was also, in a sense, proposing the imprisonment or removal of the very gods the Golden Order worshipped. Gold Mask had studied the order so deeply that he had concluded the gods themselves were the problem. Divinity was a flaw. Worship was directed at the source of corruption. This revelation drove Corrin to despair. He could not accept that his entire faith was built on a contradiction. That the order he had devoted his life to was inherently broken. Some truths are too heavy to bear. While the Golden Order stagnated, the demigods were developing into their own persons, each carrying the weight of divine parentage and the expectations that came with it. Godwyn the Golden stood as the perfect prince. He was everything the Golden Order claimed to value. He befriended Fortisax, an ancient dragon, forming a bond of mutual respect that helped end the war between their kinds. He was beloved by the common people, respected by warriors, and genuinely kind in a world where kindness was increasingly rare. If anyone could have been a good god, it might have been Godwyn. Morgoth and Mog grew up in darkness beneath the capital. The shunning grounds became their home, a prison for omened children who were considered too foul for the surface world. The irony was cruel. Marika, who may have suffered terribly herself, who knew the pain of being considered less than human, had built an order that replicated that same cruelty onto her own children. Morgoth responded to this rejection by doubling down on his loyalty. If the Golden Order said he was foul, then he would prove himself worthy anyway. He became Margit, the Fell Omen, a warrior of incredible skill who would one day defend the very capital that had imprisoned him as a child. His loyalty to an order that hated him was tragic and absolute. Mog took a different path. If the Golden Order rejected him, then he would reject it right back. He found a different god to serve, the Formless Mother, an outer god of blood and wounds. The Formless Mother did not care that Mog was an omen. She embraced him, empowered him, gave him the love and acceptance that the Golden Order had denied. But the Formless Mother's love came with a price, as all divine love does. Mog became obsessed with blood, with wounds, with building a new dynasty that would replace the Golden Order. And his attention fixed on Miquella, his cursed half-brother, in ways that were deeply troubling. Whether this obsession was his own or planted by divine influence would remain unclear. Runni, Radon, and Rykard were raised in privilege, children of Radagon and Renala, inheriting both golden lineage and the moon magic of Carrion sorcery. They were demigods, yes, but they had not grown up in Laendal's golden cage. They had perspective that Marika's other children lacked. Runni became a lunar princess, studying magic and fate under the cold light of the moon. She was brilliant, ambitious, and increasingly convinced that the Golden Order was a trap. The outer gods demanded worship and gave only chains in return. She began to plot something audacious. Something that would require her to die. Radon became a general of extraordinary skill. He studied gravity magic so he could continue to ride his beloved horse Leonard even as he grew to massive size. He held back the very stars, freezing the constellations in place. This was not simply a show of power. By holding the stars, Radon was preventing fate itself from unfolding. Each star was connected to destiny, and frozen stars meant frozen futures. It was an act of cosmic defiance, and Radon maintained it through sheer will. Rykard became the Lord of Blasphemy, though his path to that title was gradual. He was a praetor of Laendal, a judge and enforcer of law. But he saw the cruelty in that law, the way it ground down those beneath it. He began to question. And in his questioning, he found something terrible. The god-devouring serpent, a massive creature that could consume even divine beings. Rykard made a choice. He fed himself to the serpent, merging with it, becoming something new. Something that could devour gods. "Together we will devour the very gods," became his mantra, his voice distorted by the serpent's nature. Rykard had chosen to become a monster to fight monsters. But in doing so, he had lost himself almost completely. Maelnia and Miquella's bond was absolute. Maelnia existed to protect her brother. Her curse was agony, the rot eating at her from within, but she bore it because Miquella needed her. She became the blade of Miquella, the most skilled warrior in the lands between, and her entire identity became wrapped up in her service to him. Miquella, for his part, tried to fix everything. He could not fix his own curse, could not grow, could not age, but perhaps he could fix everyone else. He worked to cure Melinia's rot. He created the Halig tree, a new Erd tree to rival Marika's, one not bound to the greater will. He developed unalloyed gold, pure gold free from outside influence, hoping it could resist the outer gods' meddling. Every attempt to help made things worse. The Halig tree grew but remained incomplete. Unalloyed gold helped but did not cure. Miquella learned the cruel lesson that good intentions and divine power do not guarantee good outcomes. Somewhere in the shadows, a group was forming. The Black Knife Assassins, women of Numan descent, the same people that Marika had come from. They were trained in a very specific art. The assassination of gods. Their weapons were special. Daggers imbued with a fragment of the rune of death, the very power that Malekith guarded so carefully. How they acquired this fragment is one of the great mysteries. Did they steal it from Malekith? That seems nearly impossible. Or was it given to them? And if so, by whom? The most likely answer is the one least spoken aloud. Marika herself provided the fragment. Marika, who was planning something, who had exiled Godfrey and the Tarnished for reasons not yet clear, who was positioning pieces for a future conflict. Marika wanted someone dead. Someone whose death would shatter everything. Her own son. The night was planned with precision. The target was Godwin the Golden, the perfect prince, the beloved son, the best of them all. He was sleeping in the capital when the assassins came. The black knives moved like shadows. Their footsteps made no sound. Their blades, imbued with destined death, could do what should be impossible in the lands between. They could kill permanently. No return to the Erdtree. No resurrection. True death. But something else happened that night, synchronized with Godwin's assassination. Runni, far from the capital, performed a ritual. She slew her own body using a fragment of the same rune of death. Two deaths happened simultaneously, interwoven, connected by dark magic and darker purpose. The rune of death that night was split between two targets. Godwin's soul was killed, but his body lived on. Runni's body was killed, but her soul survived. It was a half-death for each of them, a splitting of mortality's natural order. Godwin's body began to change. Without a soul to animate it properly, it started to decay in ways that defied nature. The flesh turned pale, pulsing with a strange unlife. His eyes became fish-like, staring at nothing. Roots began to grow from his corpse, spreading through the Erdtree's own roots, carrying his death contamination throughout the lands between. This was the first true death since Marika had removed the rune of death from the Elden Ring. And it was wrong. It was corrupted. It was a death that should not be, spreading like a cancer through the very foundations of the world. Those who loved Godwin were devastated. Fortisax, the ancient dragon who had been his friend, tried desperately to save him. The dragon dove into Godwin's corruption, fighting the deathblight from within, trying to purge it with dragon fire and willpower. It was useless. Fortisax became corrupted too, trapped in Godwin's dying dream, fighting an impossible battle for eternity. Runni, meanwhile, discarded her dead flesh and transferred her soul into a doll. A puppet body, crafted to her specifications, allowing her to live but freeing her from divine influence. She could not be controlled by the two fingers. She could not be made into a god against her will. She had cut herself free, but the cost was everything. Her body. Her connections. Her very existence in the physical world. She went into hiding, her plot incomplete but progressing. She had killed herself to escape the gods. And in doing so, she had helped kill the Golden Order's greatest hope. The death of Godwin shattered something in Marika. Perhaps she had planned it, orchestrated it even, but facing the reality of her son's death was different than planning it in the abstract. The perfect prince was dead. The best of them was gone. And the Golden Order had not saved him because the Golden Order's removal of death had created the very conditions that made his death so horrific. Or perhaps Marika's breaking was always planned. Perhaps Godwin's death was the trigger she needed, the excuse, the final straw that would justify what she had always intended to do. Marika stood before the Elden Ring, the very essence of order that she housed within her own body. And she raised a weapon. And she struck. The Elden Ring shattered. It was an act of rebellion so profound that it rewrote reality. The laws of the world broke. The order that had governed everything fractured. The greater will's perfect system came apart, and Marika, its vessel, its prisoner, was the one who broke it. I have seen it. The Elden Ring, shattered by someone or something. Those words would echo through the lands between. But they were incomplete. It was not just someone. It was the god herself. The prison had broken her chains from the inside. But freedom came at a cost. The greater will was not pleased. Marika was punished. She was crucified within the Erdtree, hung on a rune-marked tree, suspended between life and death, unable to move, unable to act. And Radagon, her other self, was forced to try to repair what Marika had broken. There, in the heart of the Erdtree, Marika and Radagon struggled. She wanted it broken. He wanted it repaired. They were the same being fighting itself, divinity at war with its own nature. And while they struggled, trapped in divine punishment and divine purpose, the Elden Ring remained shattered. Without the ring to enforce order, the lands between fell into chaos. The demigods had inherited fragments of the shattered Elden Ring. Great runes, pieces of cosmic law, each one granting incredible power but also driving ambition to madness. With Marika imprisoned and the Golden Order broken, there was no central authority. Just demigods with fragments of god power, each one believing they should be the next Elden Lord, the next god. War came to the lands between. It was not a simple war. It was not armies meeting on fields in honorable combat. It was a nightmare of divine powers unleashed without restraint. Demigods fought each other, their powers warping the very land they battled over. Regions were scarred. Ecosystems were destroyed. Entire populations were caught in conflicts between beings so far above them that mortal life meant nothing. The worst battle came when Maelnia and Radon clashed. Radon was undefeated. A general of incredible skill, a warrior of massive strength, holding back the stars themselves through sheer will. His armies were vast. His fortress at Redmane Castle was impregnable. He seemed invincible. Maelnia marched on Caelid to face him. The blade of Miquella against the Star Scourge. Two demigods, each a master of war, each carrying a great rune, each believing they could not lose. The battle was cataclysmic. They fought to a standstill, either able to truly overcome the other. And then Maelnia made a choice. Or perhaps she had no choice. Perhaps the rot inside her made the choice for her. She bloomed. The scarlet rot that had been eating her from within exploded outward. A flower of decay, beautiful and terrible, spread across the battlefield. Radon was infected. His soldiers were consumed. The entire region of Caelid was drowned in rot. The land itself began to decay, turning red and pustulant, filled with monstrous mutations and creeping death. Maelnia collapsed, the bloom taking everything from her. Her soldiers carried her back to the Haligtree, barely alive, more rot than flesh. She fell into a coma-like state, waiting at the tree's roots, her body a husk, her mind lost to dreams. Radon survived, but survival was perhaps worse than death would have been. The rot ate at his mind. The great general became feral, his consciousness consumed by hunger and pain. He still held the stars in place through pure instinct, but the man who had studied gravity magic, who had loved his horse, who had been a brilliant tactician, was gone. What remained was a monster roaming the rotted wastes of Caelid, eating the corpses of his own dead soldiers. His loyal warriors held a festival in his honor. A festival of combat, where champions could come to fight the Star Scourge. Not to defeat him in conquest, but to grant him mercy. To kill the husk of what had once been Radon the Great. Death as an act of love for someone who could not die on their own. This was the Shattering's legacy. Not glory. Not victory. Just rot, madness, and mercy killings for demigods who had become monsters. The war continued, but it had no winners. Just survivors slowly destroying themselves and everything around them. The Golden Order was broken. The demigods were broken. The lands between were broken. And no one had the power or the wisdom to fix any of it. While war consumed the lands between, Miquella the Unalloyed had a dream. If the Golden Order could not save the world, if the Greater Will only offered chains, if the Erdtree had failed, then perhaps something new could be built. Something better. The Haligtree was Miquella's greatest work. Not golden like the Erdtree, but pale, almost ghostly. It grew in secret, fed by Miquella's own blood, watered with unalloyed gold. This tree would be different. It would accept those the Golden Order had rejected. Omens, Albinaurics, those cursed and outcast would find a home beneath its branches. Miquella's vision was genuinely compassionate. He saw the suffering his mother's order had created and wanted to undo it. The Haligtree would be a sanctuary. No discrimination. No judgment. Just peace for those who had never known it. But divine blood alone could not complete such a work. The Haligtree grew, but slowly, incompletely. It needed more. Miquella needed more power, more knowledge, more time. His cursed form, forever a child, limited him in ways that divine power could not overcome. So Miquella made a decision. He would slumber within the halig tree, cocooning himself, attempting to shed his curse through a kind of metamorphosis. If he could not grow naturally, perhaps he could transform unnaturally. Perhaps he could emerge from the cocoon whole, adult, powerful enough to complete his dream. He wove himself into the roots and closed his eyes. His followers tended the tree. Maelnia, when she returned from Caelid more dead than alive, placed herself at the tree's base. She would guard her brother's cocoon. Even in her rotted, comatose state, she would protect him. It was all she had left. The halig tree grew slowly, waiting for its creator to wake. But Miquella would never complete his transformation. Something terrible was coming. In the depths beneath the lands between, Mog the Lord of Blood had built his own domain. The Mogwin Palace, a place of blood and wounds, where the formless mother's power ran thick. Mog had created a dynasty of blood, recruiting those who felt outcast or drawn to the darker powers. But dynasties need heirs. And Mog had become obsessed with a particular heir. Miquella. It's unclear whether this obsession was entirely Mog's own or if divine influence played a part. Miquella's power was strange. He was Empyrean, blessed with an ability to compel affection, to make others love him. Some whispered that he had charmed Mog, that the Lord of Blood's obsession was not desire but divine compulsion wearing desire's mask. Mog tore Miquella from his cocoon. The transformation was incomplete. Miquella's curse was not shed. His body remained small, fragile, a child god ripped from metamorphosis before it could complete. Mog carried Miquella to the Mogwin Palace and placed him in his own cocoon, feeding him cursed blood, trying to share his dynasty with the one he claimed to love. The cocoon withered. Miquella's arm hung limp and pale, drained of color. Inside, Miquella was gone. Not dead but absent. His consciousness had fled to somewhere else, some other realm. The body remained, but the mind, the soul, the essence of who Miquella was had departed. Mog kept vigil anyway, speaking to the empty cocoon as if his beloved would answer. Building his blood dynasty for an heir who was not present. The formless mother's influence grew stronger in Mog's palace, and Mog himself became less of a person and more of a vessel for bloody ritual. The halig tree began to rot. Without Miquella's presence, without his power feeding it, the tree's growth became corrupted. Scarlet rot crept into its branches, the same rot that afflicted Maelnia. The sanctuary Miquella had dreamed of became another cursed place, beautiful and dying, filled with refugees who had nowhere else to go. Loretta, a knight who had once served the Carian royals, had come to the halig tree seeking sanctuary for the Albinorics, an artificial race despised by the Golden Order. She found the tree but found no salvation. Just another dying dream. Still, she stayed guarding the approach, because even a dying dream was better than nothing. At the roots of the rotting halig tree, Maelnia remained in her coma-like state. The scarlet rot had consumed most of her body. She had bloomed once in Caelid, releasing the rot in a desperate gambit against Radon. The bloom had drained her nearly to death. But she lived still. Her prosthetic arm, crafted by Miquella from unalloyed gold, remained uncorrupted. Her will remained iron strong. She was the blade of Miquella. As long as some fragment of purpose remained, she would not truly die. In her dreams, she waited for her brother's return. In her dreams, she had not failed. In her dreams, Miquella still worked on his cure, still built his sanctuary, still represented hope for a better world. The reality was that Miquella was gone, stolen by Mog. The halig tree was rotting. The sanctuary was collapsing. And Maelnia slept through it all, unaware that everything her brother had built was falling apart. When she woke, if she woke, it would be to fight. That was all she knew how to do anymore. The goddess of rot slept in the corpse of a dream, and around her, The scarlet decay spread like a funeral shroud. Radon's fate was perhaps the cruelest of all the demigods. Once a brilliant general, a scholar of magic, a warrior so powerful he held the stars themselves in place, he had been reduced to something barely sentient. The scarlet rot ate at his mind, consumed his thoughts, left only base instinct and endless hunger. His massive body, once maintained through gravity magic so he could ride his beloved horse Leonard, now was a tool of mindless violence. He roamed the Kaled wastes, eating carrion, attacking anything that moved, a mad beast wearing the shell of a demigod. But even corrupted, even feral, Radon maintained one thing: he still held the stars. His will, reduced to animal simplicity, still performed that one cosmic task. The stars remained frozen. Fate remained on hold. It was an unconscious action now, like breathing, but it persisted. His soldiers could not bear to see him like this. The Renane warriors, who had followed Radon through countless battles, who had witnessed his glory and his fall, organized the festival. A tournament of champions, with Radon himself as the final opponent. It was framed as honor, as a celebration of Radon's warrior spirit. But it was mercy. They were asking warriors from across the lands between to come and kill their general because they loved him too much to let him suffer any longer. Jaren, Radon's most loyal retainer, stood as announcer and witness. He praised Radon's glory. He invited challengers. And in his eyes there was only sadness. This was how the greatest general of the age would end. Not in glory, but in a mercy-killing disguised as a festival. And when Radon finally fell, when the accumulated damage from countless challengers finally brought the star scourge down, the stars began to move again. Fate, held in check for so long, came crashing back into motion. Somewhere, Rundi's plan took a step forward. But for the Renmain soldiers, there was only grief. They had freed their general from suffering. The cost was losing him entirely. In Mount Gelmir, Rykard the Lord of Blasphemy had completed his transformation into something monstrous. The serpent had consumed him, or he had consumed the serpent. The distinction no longer mattered. What emerged was a fusion of both, a massive serpent-man hybrid that could devour even gods. "Together we will devour the very gods!" The phrase repeated, over and over, sometimes spoken, sometimes just echoing through the volcanic corridors of his manor. Rykard's obsession with consumption had consumed him in turn. His followers worshipped him anyway. The recusants, those who had turned away from the Golden Order, saw in Rykard a champion who could destroy the old world. They fed him. They brought sacrifices. They helped him grow larger, more powerful, more monstrous. Rykard's body became difficult to distinguish from the serpent's. His human face protruded from the serpent's mouth, screaming about devouring gods. The rest was serpent, massive and terrible, soaking in lava, coiling through chambers too large for any normal building. Tanith, his consort, remained loyal. She organized the recusants, welcomed new members to the Volcano Manor, set them on missions to hunt down tarnished champions. She loved Rykard, or loved what Rykard had been, or perhaps loved the idea of loving something so terrible that everyone else fled from it. When Rykard fell, when the god-devouring serpent was finally slain, Tanith could not accept it. She found his remains and began to eat them, consuming her lord's flesh, trying to keep him alive inside her. It was devotion taken to horrific extremes. It was love transformed into grotesque ritual. Rykard had wanted to devour gods. Instead, he had taught his followers that devotion looks a lot like madness if you follow it far enough. While her brothers fell into madness and mutation, Runny pursued her plan with cold precision. She had killed her body to escape the Two Fingers' control. Now she needed to complete what she had started. Her plan required specific elements. She needed the Rune of Death, or at least the power to kill the abstract concept of destiny itself. She needed allies who could reach places she could not. And she needed the stars to move, to allow fate to progress. Runny gathered followers. Blade, a half-wolf warrior created by the Two Fingers to be her shadow, but who loved her genuinely. E.g., a war counselor troll of incredible wisdom and loyalty. Suluvis, a sorcerer with his own dark agenda involving mind-controlling puppets. Each served her for different reasons. But the Two Fingers would not allow Runny to escape. Blade, created to serve her, was also created to ensure she followed the path the Greater Will intended. As Runny's plan diverged from what the Two Fingers wanted, Blade began to feel the conditioning kick in. He was being programmed to betray her, to kill her if necessary, to force her back onto the path of becoming a god for the Greater Will. Blade fought the conditioning. His loyalty to Runny was real. But the Two Fingers' programming was woven into his very being. He became erratic, violent, struggling against invisible chains that pulled tighter the more Runny's plan succeeded. E.G. knew what was happening. He imprisoned Blade in an Evergale, a magical prison, to protect both Blade and Runny from what the warrior might be forced to do. It was an act of love disguised as betrayal. Runny's quest led to Nokron, the Eternal City, a place hidden underground where the Nox people had once tried to create their own Elden Lord and were punished by the Greater Will for their hubris. Here, Runny sought the Finger's Layer Blade, a weapon that could kill even the cosmic entities that served as conduits for the outer gods. With the Finger's Layer Blade, Runny could kill her own Two Fingers, severing the last connection between herself and the Greater Will. It would be a declaration of total independence. No god. No order. No outside influence. Just Runny, free to chart her own course. But freedom required isolation. Runny's path was cold. Literally. She sought to replace the Golden Order with an age of stars, where the lands between would be guided not by immediate divine presence but by cold, distant cosmos. The stars would determine fate, but they would do so from far away, unable to interfere directly, unable to cage people in divine law. It was freedom through abandonment. Solve the problem of tyrannical gods by removing the gods entirely, leaving only cold starlight and the freedom to choose one's own path without divine interference. Blade, driven mad by his conflicting programming, eventually broke free and had to be killed. He died defending Runny's rise even as the conditioning tried to make him kill her. E.G. wept for him, then was himself targeted by Black Knife assassins for his role in Runny's plot. The loyal counselor died still serving his princess, still believing her plan could work. Runny achieved her goal. She killed her Two Fingers. She obtained the means to free the lands between from the Greater Will's control. But the cost was everyone she loved. Success meant standing alone in the cold void between stars, having sacrificed everything to ensure that no one would ever be controlled again. Was it worth it? Runny thought so. But she would carry the weight of those deaths forever. Not all the power in the lands between flowed from the Greater Will. Other outer gods circled the realm like vultures, seeking entry, seeking worship, seeking vessels to channel their power. The Formless Mother was one such entity. Her domain was blood and wounds, not as destruction but as sacrament. Every cut, every bleeding wound, was a prayer to her. Pain was communion. Exsanguination was ecstasy. Mog became her primary champion in the lands between. Whether he found her or she found him, the connection transformed him. He developed powers over blood, able to call up cursed blood flame, to drain vitality from others, to build a dynasty founded on hemorrhagic ritual. The Formless Mother offered Mog something the Golden Order never would: acceptance. She did not care that he was Omen. She did not judge his cursed horns or his exile. She embraced him entirely, and in return, Mog became her most devoted servant. But the Formless Mother's love was possessive and demanding. Mog's obsession with Miquella may have been partly her influence, a drive to corrupt the kindest Empyrean into something that could serve her purposes. The dynasty Mog built was meant to replace the Golden Order, but it would replace tyranny with bloody cult, one cage for another painted red. The Scarlet Rot was not simply disease. It was divinity in decay's form. Somewhere beyond the lands between, sealed away or merely sleeping, existed a god of rot whose very essence was corruption and bloom. This god had a champion once, in an age before the Golden Order. A swordsman who had sealed the rot god away, becoming infected in the process, fighting the rot spread inside his own body for centuries. That swordsman still fought, still held the seal, still prevented the rot god from fully manifesting. But Maelnia was born connected to this outer power. Her curse was not random. It was a claim. The god of rot saw in her a perfect vessel, an Empyrean who could bring the rot god's full power into the lands between if she bloomed enough times. Each bloom was a transformation. Maelnia became less human, more divine, more rot. The first bloom in Ionia, during her battle with Radon, had been instinctive, desperate. If she bloomed twice more, the transformation would complete. Maelnia would become the goddess of rot fully, and the sealed god would find its way back into the world through her. Maelnia did not want this. She fought the rot every day, used unalloyed gold to slow its spread, tried desperately to remain herself. But the rot god was patient. Gods can wait. And every time Maelnia's will weakened, every time she faced death, the bloom would call to her. Just let go. Just transform. Just accept the rot and become divine. It was a seduction disguised as inevitability. Beneath the lands between, literally beneath, lay a place called the Frenzied Flame Proscription. Here, merchants had been persecuted by the Golden Order, thrown into sewers and dungeons to die for crimes real or imagined. In their suffering and despair, they called out to anything that would listen. And something answered. The Frenzied Flame, an outer god representing chaos, madness, and the total annihilation of all distinction. The Frenzied Flame's philosophy was simple and terrible. All suffering comes from separation. The separation of individuals, of concepts, of life from death. The only true peace comes from ending all separation. Burning away all distinction. Melting everything back into primordial oneness. It was oblivion disguised as peace. "May chaos take the world!" was both prayer and threat. Those touched by the frenzied flame went mad, their eyes burning with yellow fire, their bodies warping, their minds consumed by visions of a world burned clean of suffering because nothing would exist to suffer. Vike, a tarnished knight who had come close to becoming Elden Lord, had been touched by the frenzied flame. He had tried to save someone he loved from a curse by taking the flame into himself. It consumed him, drove him mad, turned him into a cautionary tale. Love could not save you from the frenzied flame. Nothing could. Deep in the depths, Hyetta, or the thing speaking through her dead eyes, preached the frenzied flame's gospel. The Lord of Frenzied Flame would be born to burn away the mistakes of the greater will, to end the cycle of suffering by ending existence itself. It was the most nihilistic of all the paths available. Not reformation. Not freedom. Just annihilation. If the world is broken, burn it all and let nothing remain. Shabriri, an ancient figure, promoted this philosophy, jumping from body to body, spreading madness and chaos. The frenzied flame needed a champion, someone who would embrace it fully, become its lord, and set the world ablaze. Before the Erdtree, before the Golden Order, the giants had their own god. The fell god, dwelling in flame, one-eyed and burning. This god did not demand worship in the way the greater will did. It simply burned, and the giants tended its flame. When Marika's forces destroyed the giants, when the war left only one survivor chained to tend the forge, the fell god did not die. Gods do not die easily. It waited in the flame, patient as all cosmic forces are patient. The flame of ruin had the power to burn the Erdtree itself. This is why the flame was so dangerous, why it had to be contained, why the last fire giant was cursed to guard it. As long as the flame existed, the Golden Order was vulnerable. One spark in the right place, and everything Marika had built could burn. The fire giant was the loneliest being in the lands between. The last of his people, forced to guard the flame that represented his entire destroyed civilization. He could not die. He could not stop. He could only tend the forge and remember everyone he had lost. Some destinies are nothing but mourning given eternal form. Runni's chosen patron was not an outer god in the aggressive sense. The dark moon was cold, distant, representing a different kind of cosmic force. Not tyranny, but also not care. The moon's guidance was subtle, remote, allowing mortals their freedom because the moon was simply too far away to interfere directly. Rennala had once channeled the power of the full moon through her sorcery. But when Radagon left her, when grief consumed her mind, she could no longer reach that distant light. She held the amber egg he had given her, whispering to it, lost in memories and madness. The moon did not comfort her. The moon did not care. The moon simply shone, cold and beautiful and unreachable. Runny sought to harness this same distance as a feature, not a bug. Replace the Golden Order's immediate tyranny with the moon's distant indifference. Let people be free because the cosmic forces are too far away to chain them. It was a strange kind of salvation. Freedom through abandonment. Peace through cosmic loneliness. Better than the greater will's cage, perhaps, but still cold comfort. Through all of this, the greater will remained the dominant force, but its true nature became increasingly unclear. Was it a god? A cosmic principle? A parasitic entity using the lands between as a host? The two fingers claimed to speak for the greater will, interpreting its desires, guiding the chosen toward their appointed destinies. But the fingers themselves were flawed, born from Mater, who had not heard from the greater will in ages. Were the two fingers' interpretations accurate? Or were they filling in the silence with their own assumptions? Goldmask's revelation struck at this uncertainty. The Golden Order was flawed because the gods enforcing it were flawed. But perhaps the greater will itself was also flawed. Perhaps the cosmic order everyone worshipped was not perfect law but merely another power seeking dominance, using prettier words than the other outer gods, but ultimately wanting the same thing: control. The Elden Ring had been shattered. Marika had broken it from the inside. And the greater will's response was to punish her, imprison her, try to force repair through Radagon. The response of a tyrant whose property was damaged, not a benevolent deity whose beloved creation needed healing. This realization spread slowly through the lands between. The golden light that had seemed so pure might just be another color of chain. The order might just be another word for cage. And worship might just be another word for submission. When Godfrey was exiled, when grace was stripped from him and his warriors, they became tarnished. The name was a mark of shame. They wandered beyond the lands between, fighting in foreign lands, dying in foreign wars, their golden lineage tarnished by exile. But death, for the tarnished, was not quite the end. Godfrey and his warriors died, yes, but their souls did not go to the Erd Tree. They went somewhere else. Waiting. Sleeping in death, outside the lands between sporters, outside time's normal flow. Then the shattering happened. Marika broke the Elden Ring. The demigods fell into war. The lands between descended into chaos with no clear path to restoration. And in that moment of crisis, something called to the tarnished. Grace returned. The golden light that had been stripped from them flickered back into existence, visible in their eyes. Not because they had earned it. Not because they were forgiven. But because they were needed. The dead tarnished woke. In distant lands, in battlefields long settled, in graves both honored and forgotten, the tarnished opened their eyes and saw the guiding light of grace once more. It pointed back. Back to the lands between. Back to the broken order that had exiled them. It was not an apology. It was a summons. Not all tarnished were the same. Some were warriors of Godfrey's original company, ancient fighters who had died in the exile wars. Others were descended from those warriors, carrying tarnished blood even if they had never seen the lands between. Each had their own reasons for answering the call. Nephili Lu carried Godfrey's warrior spirit. She was not subtle, not political. She fought because fighting was what her bloodline had always done. But she had honor too, a sense of justice that the Golden Order had long since lost. When she saw the Omen and Stormveil being tortured, she was disgusted. Her ancestors might have built that system, but she wanted no part of perpetuating it. Bloody Finger Hunter Yura pursued those who killed for pleasure. He hunted the members of the Bloody Fingers, tarnished who had given themselves over to chaos and murder. Yura was measured, calm, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. But even he would fall, his body possessed by Shabriri, turned into a vessel for the frenzied flames propaganda. Sir Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, sought knowledge above all else. He gathered information about the demigods, the outer gods, the nature of the Elden Ring itself. But knowledge without wisdom is just trivia, and Gideon would learn too much. He would uncover truths that convinced him that no one should ever become Elden Lord, that the struggle was pointless, that the kindest thing would be eternal stagnation. Dung Eater was perhaps the vilest of all tarnished. His goal was not power or knowledge or even chaos. His goal was to curse everyone. To defile every soul so thoroughly that they and their descendants would be born cursed forever. He sought to create an age of despair so complete that suffering would become hereditary. His name was earned through deeds too foul to speak aloud. Gold Mask sought perfection in the order itself. He believed the answer lay in removing divine fickleness, in creating law so perfect it could run without gods to enforce it. His solution was brilliant and terrifying: make the order so absolute that even gods could not change it. Fia, the deathbed companion, sought to restore those who live in death. She saw the undead as victims of the Golden Order's removal of death, cursed to exist but not live. Her warmth was genuine, her embraces real, but her goal was to birth a rune of death in life, to allow the undead their own order, their own grace. And there were others. Countless tarnished, each answering Grace's call for their own reasons. Some wanted power. Some wanted revenge. Some wanted understanding. None of them were purely good or purely evil. They were people, complicated and flawed, thrust into a situation far larger than themselves. Grace guided the tarnished, but it did not explain. The golden light pointed toward sights of grace, toward paths forward, but it did not tell them why. It did not reveal the full picture. It simply pulled them along, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, toward a destination it never fully articulated. The path led through horrors. Stormveil Castle, where Godric the Golden, last and least of the golden lineage, grafted body parts onto himself in a desperate attempt to become great. He was pathetic, claiming glory he had never earned, wearing strength he had stolen from others. His defeat was almost mercy. The path led to Liurnia, to Raya Lucaria Academy, where Renala still cradled her amber egg, lost in grief and illusion. The scholars had gone mad, warping their bodies through glintstone sorcery gone wrong. Renala had to be faced, but defeating her felt like bullying someone already broken. The path led through Caelid, through scarlet rot and decay, through the monstrous wastes where Radon wandered mindless and mad. The festival called for his death, and Tarnished obliged, Mercy killing a demigod who could no longer remember his own glory. The path led to Leyndell, the capital, where Morgoth defended a city that despised him. He was the veiled monarch, hiding his omen nature while serving the Golden Order with absolute loyalty. He fought Tarnished not out of ambition but out of duty. Someone had to defend the Erdtree. Someone had to maintain order. If not him, who? When Morgoth fell, he called himself a mongrel with his dying breath. He had given everything to an order that considered him filth, and his reward was to die defending a system that would never accept him. The path led to the Haligtree, where Maelnia waited in her rot sleep. Waking her meant fighting the most skilled warrior in the lands between, a demigod who had never known defeat. Each swing of her blade was poetry. Each bloom of scarlet rot was apocalypse. She was magnificent and tragic, fighting to protect a brother who was no longer there. The path led to Mogwyn Palace, where Mog sat beside Miquella's withered cocoon, speaking to an empty shell, building a dynasty for an absent heir. His defeat ended the delusion, but revealed the tragedy. Miquella was gone. The kindest of the Empyreans had disappeared, and no one knew where. The path led everywhere and nowhere. Each victory revealed only deeper tragedy. Each step forward through Grace's guidance led to more broken dreams and shattered gods. Eventually, the Tarnished would reach a choice point. 3 paths, each offering a different answer to the question, what comes after the shattering? One path led to the frenzied flame. Descend into the depths. Meet Hyetta or the thing wearing her corpse. Open yourself to the flame that promises to end all suffering by ending all existence. Become the Lord of Chaos. Burn it all. Let nothing remain. It was seductive in its simplicity. The world is broken beyond repair. Then don't repair it. Destroy it. No more suffering because no more anything. The frenzied flame did not promise a better world. It promised no world at all. Taking this path meant betraying Melina, the guide who had helped the Tarnished from the beginning. It meant watching her swear vengeance even as the flame consumed everything. It meant becoming the very thing every other character had fought to prevent. But it also meant acknowledging that maybe the problem was existence itself. Maybe the kindest thing was ending the game rather than trying to win it. Another path led to Rennie's Age of Stars. Help the Lunar Princess complete her quest. Find the Finger's Layer blade. Defeat the shadow of her fate. Allow her to kill her 2 fingers and free herself from divine control. Runny offered an age of cold stars and distant guidance. No more Erdtree. No more direct divine interference. Just the cosmos, beautiful and uncaring, leaving mortals to find their own way without gods breathing down their necks. It was freedom, but it was lonely freedom. Runny herself would depart, taking the Order with her, leaving the lands between to fend for itself. No tyranny, but also no guidance. No chains, but also no safety net. The third path led to the Erdtree itself. Burn it with the flame of ruin. Break through to where Marika was imprisoned. Face Radagon and the Elden Beast. Defeat the embodiment of the Greater Will's power. Take the Elden Ring. And then, choose. Standing before the shattered Elden Ring, having defeated gods and demigods, having burned the Erdtree and broken every defense the Golden Order could muster, the Tarnished faced one last choice: how to mend what was broken. The Age of Fracture offered the simplest solution. Repair the ring. Restore the Order. Become Elden Lord. Nothing fundamentally changes except who sits on the throne. The Golden Order returns, perhaps slightly different, perhaps not. The cycle continues. The Erdtree grows again. Grace guides again. And in a few thousand years, perhaps it will all shatter once more. It was the safe choice. The conservative choice. Fix what was broken without asking if it should have been built in the first place. The Age of Order, Goldmask's vision, offered a more radical repair. Perfect the ring. Remove the god's ability to interfere. Create laws so absolute that divine whim cannot touch it. It solved the problem of capricious gods by making the law supreme over even divinity. But perfect law is also perfect imprisonment. No flexibility. No growth. No adaptation. The Order would be eternal and unchanging, and so would everything trapped within it. The Age of Duskborn, FIA's ending, brought those who live in death into the Order. The undead would be welcomed, death would be woven back into life in a new way. It was compassionate to the cursed, yes, but it also normalized undeath. Everyone would eventually become a shambling corpse thing, neither alive nor dead, existing in perpetual twilight. The blessing of despair, Dung Eater's ending, cursed everyone. Every soul defiled. Every birth cursed. Suffering made hereditary and eternal. It was malice given cosmic expression, hatred woven into the fabric of reality itself. The Age of Stars, if Runny's quest was complete, meant departure. The Order would leave with Runny. The moon would guide from afar, cold and distant. Mortals would be free but alone, no gods to tyrannize them but also no gods to save them. and the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending meant burning it all. Melina's prophecy fulfilled. The world consumed by chaos. All division ended by ending all things. It was oblivion dressed up as mercy. Each ending was a statement about what had gone wrong and how to fix it. Each was partially right and partially horrifying. There was no good ending. There were only different flavors of tragedy, different choices about which broken future to build. Inside the burning Erd tree, Marika hung crucified on a rune-marked tree. Her body was broken, her will shattered. But Radagon, her other self, still moved. Radagon took up his hammer. The same hammer he had once used to repair Renala's moonstone, returning it to her before abandoning her. Now he turned that hammer on the Elden Ring itself, trying to repair what Marika had shattered. But Marika and Radagon were the same being. He was trying to repair something that she had broken from the inside. Every strike of his hammer was a fight with himself. Every mended rune was immediately stressed by Marika's will pulling in the opposite direction. The gods were at war with themselves, and no one could win. When the Tarnished finally broke through, when they stood before the shattered god, Radagon rose to fight. Not because he wanted to. Not because he had ambition or desire. But because he was programmed to defend the order. Because the greater will still pulled his strings. He fought with the desperation of someone who knows they're going to lose but cannot stop fighting. Each strike of his hammer was precise, powerful, and ultimately futile. He was defending a broken system with a broken body and a burning tree that symbolized the broken dreams of an entire age. When he fell, there was no dialogue. No final words. No revelation. Just silence as his body crumbled, revealing what had been hidden inside all along. The Elden Ring was not just a set of laws. It was alive. The Elden Beast, the living embodiment of the Greater Will's power, the golden star that had fallen in the age before ages, dwelt within the ring, within Marika, within the very concept of order itself. When Radagon fell, the Elden Beast emerged. Not from his corpse, but from the realm beyond, from the space between reality and divine abstraction. It took form as something massive, something that moved like no creature of flesh ever could, something that was beautiful and terrible and utterly alien. The beast fought not with malice but with purpose. It was defending itself, yes, but more importantly, it was defending the very concept of divine order. If the Elden Ring fell, if the Greater Will's law was overthrown, what would happen to the cosmic structure the beast represented? The battle was not personal. The beast did not hate. It did not fear. It simply was, and it would continue to be, and anything that threatened that continuation would be opposed with the full weight of divine power. But even divine power can fail. The Tarnished, mortal and flawed and driven by unclear purpose, could overcome even this. Could strike down not just the god but the living embodiment of a cosmic principle. And when the Elden Beast fell, when its massive form dissolved into golden light and faded, the question remained, what had been won? The tyranny of the Greater Will was ended. But tyranny is easier to fight than the void left in its absence. Throughout the entire story, Marika's motivations remained opaque. Why did she shatter the ring? Why did she exile Godfrey and the Tarnished only to call them back? Why did she allow Godwyn to die? What was she trying to accomplish? The answer, pieced together from fragments and implications, was rebellion. Marika had been chosen by the Greater Will to be a god, but becoming a god meant becoming a prisoner. The Elden Ring was housed in her body. She could not remove it, could not change it fundamentally, could not escape the role she had been given. But she could break it. The exile of the Tarnished was preparation. Send them away, let them die, let them exist outside the lands between's order. Then, when the time came, when the ring was shattered, they could return. They would be outside the system, not bound by its rules, capable of doing what those inside the order could never do. Godwyn's death may have been the trigger Marika needed emotionally, or it may have been part of the plan. Allow the one good thing the Golden Order produced to die in a way that exposed the Order's fundamental corruption. Show that even the perfect prince could not be saved by the perfect order. Then shatter the ring. Let the demigods fight. Let the whole rotten structure tear itself apart. And when nothing was left but ruins and regrets, the tarnished would return to find something new. It was a plan built on suffering. Marika's own suffering, yes, but also everyone else's. The demigods destroyed each other. The lands between fell into chaos. Countless mortals died in wars they didn't understand. All because Marika wanted to break free and could not find a less destructive way to do it. Was she a hero rebelling against divine tyranny? Or was she a tyrant who burned the world down rather than admit she couldn't control it? Perhaps she was both. Perhaps the distinction stopped mattering somewhere in the centuries of her imprisonment. After the shattering, after Marika broke the ring and was imprisoned for it, the greater will went silent. The two fingers continued to interpret, continued to guide, continued to claim they spoke for the greater will. But they were acting on old instructions, old programming. The greater will itself had stopped communicating. Mater, the mother of fingers, had not heard from the greater will in ages. The cosmic parent had abandoned its children, or simply moved on to other realms, other projects, other worlds to reshape. The Golden Order continued to operate, but it was running on autopilot. The priests preached doctrines that no god was actively endorsing. The fundamentalists studied laws that no one was updating. The whole system was a monument to an absentee deity. This silence was damning. If the greater will truly cared about the lands between, why not intervene during the shattering? Why not speak directly to restore order? Why allow demigods to tear each other apart while the system crumbled? The answer seemed to be that the greater will did not care. Or cared only in the abstract. It had imposed order once, and now whether that order survived or failed was not its concern. The lands between were a project the greater will had moved on from. The gods fought over scraps of attention from a cosmic force that had already forgotten them. The priests worshipped a being that no longer listened. The order defended itself with no one giving orders. It was abandonment on a divine scale, and perhaps that was the cruelest truth of all. The lands between were not locked in tyranny. They were locked in the ruins of a tyranny whose architect had left without bothering to tear down what it built. While demigods warred and gods fell silent, ordinary people tried to survive. Limgrave, the starting region, showed what the shattering had done to normal folk. Soldiers from Godric's army wandered mindlessly, defending nothing, attacking out of pure trained response. They had no cause anymore, just muscle memory of violence. Merchants huddled in caves, terrified of the giants and the dragons and the soldiers and everything else. They sold wares to tarnished but warned them against madness. The merchants had seen what happened to those who reached too far. Many of their own kind had been thrown into sewers and called the frenzied flame in their suffering. Common people hid in churches, praying to an order that no longer functioned, begging for grace that no longer flowed freely. They were not part of the grand narrative. They were just trying not to die. Irina, a blind girl, asked for help delivering a letter to her father. Her father was already dead, killed in the rebellion at Castle Morn. Her reward for trusting a tarnished with her letter would be death at the hands of the very tarnished she had asked to help. Kenneth Haight wanted to restore proper order to Limgrave, but his idea of proper order involved returning to systems of nobility and hierarchy that had enabled the Golden Order's cruelties in the first place. He meant well. His vision was still poison. This was the world the gods had abandoned. People trying to maintain structures that no longer served them, clinging to orders that had failed them, hoping for salvation from powers that did not care. Raya Lucaria Academy should have been a bastion of learning and enlightenment. Instead, it became a place of obsession and transformation gone wrong. Renala's grief had infected the entire academy. Students experimented on themselves, trying to achieve rebirth through glintstone sorcery, trying to remake themselves as something better. Instead, they became grotesque, their heads swollen with glintstone, their bodies twisted by magic they couldn't control. The scholars had lost sight of wisdom in their pursuit of knowledge. They studied the stars but could not see what studying was doing to them. They achieved transformation but not improvement. In the town of Korea, puppets walked on strings, controlled by Solivus's sick experiments in domination. He turned living people into dolls, robbing them of will, making them puppets in the most literal sense. His workshop was a monument to control disguised as research. The Korean royal family's decline mirrored the Academy's. Runmi had killed her body and fled. Radon held stars frozen, preventing any astrological fate from unfolding. Rykard had fed himself to a serpent. The great sorceress bloodline had splintered into obsession, duty, and consumption. Even the moon, Renala's patron, offered no comfort. It shone cold and distant as it always had. The dark moon did not care about the Academy's fall. It was too far away to care. What Maelnia did to Kaled in her battle with Radon was unforgivable. Not because she chose to do it, perhaps, but because the result was so horrific. The entire region became a festering wound. The land itself turned red, bleeding rot into the air. Plants mutated into carnivorous horrors. Animals became diseased monstrosities. The very soil was infected with decay that could not be cleansed. The soldiers of Radon and Maelnia who died in that battle did not get to rest. They became rot zombies, shambling corpses still fighting a war that had ended, still locked in combat formations from a battle they could not remember losing. The dogs grew to monstrous size, their flesh rotting even as they ran. Crows became massive, diseased things that fed on the infected and became more diseased themselves. Everything in Kaled was eating and being eaten, rotting and spreading that rot further. Commander O'Neill and Commander Neil led their soldiers in a hopeless defense against the rot. They could not win. They could only slow its spread. Their men were slowly turning, slowly succumbing to infection. But they maintained discipline because what else could they do? Surrender to the rot meant watching their men transform into monsters while still alive. Millicent, born from Melinia's own rot, wandered Kaled seeking her mother. She carried the rot in her blood but fought against it, tried to be more than just decay given form. Her journey was a desperate attempt to prove that even something born from curse could choose better. But Kaled did not care about individual choice or noble intent. Kaled was a reminder that divine power used carelessly destroys indiscriminately. Melinia's bloom had saved her life and doomed a region. The rot god was patient. The land would belong to decay eventually. In the mountains where Marika's forces had committed genocide against the giants, eternal winter held dominion. Snow buried the giant civilization's ruins. Ice preserved the corpses of a murdered people. The fire giant remained, chained to his forge, tending the flame of ruin. He was the last of his kind. The only one left to remember the giant culture, the giant language, the giant gods. And he was forced to guard the very flame that represented his people's power, prevented from using it to avenge them or even to die. His loneliness was absolute. The blizzard howled around him. The mountain was his prison. His duty was eternal. And when he was finally defeated, when the last giant fell, he did not even get the dignity of rage. Just relief that it was finally over. The flame of ruin could burn the Erdtree, could destroy the Golden Order's primary symbol. But unleashing it required murdering the last giant, completing the genocide Marika had started. There was no way to use the flame without more violence, without more extinction, without continuing the cycle of slaughter. Even in death, the giants could not find justice. They could only find ending. The capital should have been magnificent. Golden. The pinnacle of the Golden Order's achievement. Instead, it was a city slowly realizing its gods had abandoned it. The knights patrolled out of duty, not faith. The priests recited prayers that felt increasingly hollow. The perfumers who had once served the nobility now just tried to prevent plague from consuming the refugee camps. Morgoth, the veiled monarch, defended it all. He fought off every threat, every tarnished, every attempt to breach the thorns blocking the Erd Tree. He did this while knowing the city despised what he was. Did this while knowing the order he defended would never accept him. When he fell, when his illusion magic faded and his omen form was revealed, there was no dramatic realization from the city. No one cared that he had been defending them. He was still an omen. Still foul. Still mongrel. The capital's beauty was skin deep. Beneath the golden walls were shunning grounds where omens were tortured. Beneath the prayer houses were dungeons where merchants had been thrown to die. Beneath the noble estates were workers exploited to maintain the gilding. Landel was a monument to the Golden Order's fundamental hypocrisy. It preached perfection while building dungeons. It claimed divine right while grinding down those it deemed lesser. And when the Erd Tree burned, when the capital was covered in ash, the golden facade finally matched the rot within. After the Elden Lord was crowned, after the New Age began, what remained? The rot in Caelid would not simply disappear. The frozen mountaintop would not thaw. The undead would not suddenly return to normal death. The scars the Shattering had left were permanent. The people who had suffered through the war between demigods would not forget. The refugees who had lost everything would not simply forgive. The merchants who had been thrown into sewers would not suddenly trust the new order. Whatever came next, whatever age the Tarnished established, it would be built on ruins. The old world was gone. Burned or rotted or frozen or simply abandoned. And the new world would carry all those old wounds forward. There was no going back to the way things were. The Golden Age, if it had ever truly been golden, was over. What came next would be defined not by what was built but by what was remembered. The lands between would remember. The dead would remember. The cursed would remember. And no new order, no matter how perfect its laws or how benevolent its God, could erase those memories. The best that could be hoped for was to build something that at least acknowledged the suffering. That at least tried not to repeat the same mistakes. That at least gave people the freedom to heal in their own way, in their own time, without gods telling them how to feel about their trauma. But even that might be too much to hope for. This was the lands between. Hope had a way of curdling here. We've traveled from the age before order, through the Golden Order's rise and fall, into the Shattering's aftermath, and finally to the moment when a Tarnished remade the world or burned it down. The lands between were never meant to be a paradise. They were meant to be a testing ground for divine will, a realm where outer gods could impose their philosophies and see which one proved strongest. The people living there were not cherished creations. They were variables in a cosmic equation, pieces on a board where the players were too distant to care about individual suffering. Marika tried to break free of this, and in doing so, she broke everything. The demigods tried to claim power, and destroyed each other. The Tarnished tried to restore order, and had to choose which broken future to build. Every character in this story was tragic because every character was trapped. Trapped by divine mandate, by cursed blood, by duty or love or simple geography. The closest anyone came to freedom was Runni, and her freedom required abandoning the world entirely. This is not a story with heroes. There are no purely good figures in the lands between. Even Miquella, kind as he was, created the Halig tree through manipulation and divine compulsion. Even Godwin, perfect as he seemed, was a product of the same system that tortured omens. This is a story about how power corrupts not through malice but through distance. How gods become tyrants not by choosing evil but by being too far removed to understand the consequences of their choices. How order becomes oppression when it forgets that the people it's ordering are people, not just subjects to be organized. The Elden Ring shattered because it was always going to shatter. You cannot build eternal order with imperfect materials. You cannot create lasting peace through enforced hierarchy. You cannot make people worship something without eventually creating resentment that will burn it all down. And when it burned, when the Erd Tree turned to ash and the gods fell and the Tarnished stood before the choice of what came next, the question was never, "How do we go back?" The question was only, "What do we build from the ruins?" Some chose to rebuild the same structures with new names. Some chose to burn it all and start over. Some chose to remove divine influence entirely. None of the choices were perfect because perfect was never an option. Perfect was the lie the Golden Order had told to justify its cruelty. The lands between will continue. Rain will fall on Khalid's rot. Snow will cover the mountaintops' graves. The Erd-tree, burned or restored, will cast its shadow. And people will live in that shadow, trying to find meaning, trying to survive, trying to hope despite every reason not to. This is the tragedy of the lands between. Not that it ended badly, but that it could never have ended well. The gods guaranteed that the moment they decided mortals needed divine guidance. The moment they decided free will was less important than cosmic order. The story of Elden Ring is not about defeating evil. It's about recognizing that the structures we worship might be the source of our suffering. That the orders we cling to might be the chains holding us down. That sometimes the only way forward is to break everything and hope that what grows from the ruins is better than what came before. And sometimes, even that hope is too much to ask.